Have you ever thought about a seed? Good seeds are little things that, if planted at the right time, the right place, and are tended to, become huge blessings down the road. Whatever seeds you're sowing today, seeds for your future, for your family, for your faith, or for actual food, you're at the right place. Welcome to the Sowing Seed Podcast. Now from the studio, 20 yards from the chicken coop, and that's for reals, y'all. Here's your host, Matt Miller.
We're going to have our first frost and potentially our first freeze here at EIEIO in the next day or two. In fact, I'm excited about getting the fireplace going again, even though we don't use it a ton around here, unfortunately, in the winter. But I'm excited to at least get those logs on the fire and get it burning here in the next night or two. But because the garden, or this year's garden, is just about done, I thought I would take a few minutes and kind of talk a little bit about some of the successes and failures that this year's garden has brought. First, let's talk about the failures. There were several things that in years past we've actually done pretty well with, but for whatever reason this year, they did not do well at all. I don't know if it was me letting the weeds get the best of them. I don't know if it was maybe the irrigation was not working as well in those beds. It might have been the variety of seeds or variety of plant, or it very well could have been, the fertilization or the lack thereof, etc. But some of the things that we did not do well with this year is watermelon. I had a couple different beds of watermelon, and for whatever reason, I think we only got one or two watermelon that even approached full size, and the verdict on those that like to eat watermelon in the house was that they did not taste good at all. Spaghetti squash was another one that did not work out well for us this go around. The few that we harvested not too long ago were soft inside, and I don't know if they were left out too long before we picked them or what. And then finally, and to be honest, we have not succeeded ever up to this point in time with corn, but corn did not do well either. We planted it a little bit later. We planted it and did have irrigation going to that bed, but for whatever reason, corn didn't do well. In fact, we had a bunch of it that grew almost like this gray mold all over it, it looks like. So anyway, not sure what the deal is there. And corn is so cheap to buy at the store during the summer that I don't know that I'm ever going to take the time with it anyway to figure out what the issues have been, because it's so readily available. And maybe way too much effort at this point, if you want to know the truth. As far as successes, we had a bunch of them. Just to reiterate, for those of you that have not heard previous episodes, we have 25 12 by 4 raised beds down the hill from our place here in EIO. So we've got a lot of garden space and a lot of opportunity to grow things. And just to give you an idea, my philosophy, just because I am super busy growing and building several businesses, of course, spending time with my family, being active in my church, etc., my philosophy has always been more of a passive gardening philosophy, meaning we plant, we do what we have to do to keep the weeds and everything at bay for as long as possible. We set up irrigation so that watering can be handled automatically throughout the summer. And then we kind of let the chips fall where they may as it comes to what grows, what doesn't, what is successful, what isn't. Just because I don't have the time to go down every single day and keep track of and to observe and to make adjustments as we go. That said, because we've got a lot of beds, we have the ability to have a lot of successes, even though we may fail in some of these areas in other parts of the garden for whatever reason. First off, we were able to hire somebody to help out a little bit in preparation of the beds, so I think that helped out a ton this year, just because as busy as I was at the time when we were prepping things, it would have been difficult for me to get all the beds ready myself. We struggle a lot with with hay here. It gets into everything. And since we've got a huge hay field just down the hill from our garden, we're constantly having to fight it as it grows. The coastal hay that everybody in this area loves to have is the bane of our garden's existence, unfortunately. So we've got to dig up the soil. We've got to do a lot to prepare each and every year, realizing that by the end of the year, a lot of the coastal will be back. We planted about 10 beds of tomatoes. I would say there are about 4, maybe 5 beds that really, really did well for us. The variety that did the best overall was the Early Girls, which is a producer that produces typically earliest in the year. And because temperatures, were fairly mild compared to what they've been in previous summers, the Early Girls continued to produce pretty much all summer long. We probably harvested 5-6 bushels of tomatoes. So lots of sauce, lots of that type of thing, and lots of giving tomatoes, etc. away. Bell peppers were another big success for us this year. In years past, they've never really gotten that big. And this year we took some chicken manure that has been composting in one of our coops for about the last year or so and spread it on many of the beds before we planted or as we were putting starts in. And I think it was that fertilization that made all the difference in the world. I just picked the last bell peppers yesterday, the 26th of October, and they have been all solid, healthy, and we've literally picked hundreds of yellow, red, and green bell peppers throughout the summer. And eaten a lot as we went. We've chopped up a bunch and flash frozen them to eat during the off season as well. Zucchini. We've struggled in the last few years with zucchini just because squash bugs, after a month or so of them growing, will demolish the plants over time. So this year, I think we planted... This year we planted 3 different zucchini beds spread out around the garden, and we were able to raise the zucchini longer than normal because the squash bugs weren't able to locate it nearly as quickly and wreak havoc. It did get to the point where we were giving zucchini away to anybody who would take it. But otherwise, we ate a lot of it during the middle of the summer, froze a bunch, and that ends up being a huge staple and a huge part of our diet during the summer months. Onions have always been good. We had the biggest onions that we have ever raised this summer. Once again, I think it's due to the fertilization but I mean, I had onions that were the size bigger than, a time and or 50% bigger than the size of my fist on many occasions, both red and white and yellow onions. So that was incredible this year. Potatoes, another success. We didn't get a chance to harvest them when the plants died off, but we were able to dig up the beds later, even after weeds had overtaken the beds, and harvest a couple bushels of potatoes, some of which we eat now, others of which we will shave and freeze for hash browns, that type of thing. Cantaloupe was another good one this year for us. Amy and the girls absolutely love eating it, and we had a good month to month and a half where we had cantaloupe coming in all the time. Some of the reasons why I think we had some of the bigger success this year than we have in years past. Number one was the fertilization, like I talked about. I've used compost tea and that type of thing before throughout the season, but for whatever reason, putting that fertilizer on, putting that chicken manure on that has been composted was huge. Having the space is another thing. Not having to try to cram everything into one bed or to put all of our eggs in one basket in one bed in the event that for some reason disease or other factors that are out of our control occur. So being able to have multiple beds for many of the things we grow was a real help. Variety. I always like to plant a variety of plants, a variety of types of tomatoes or types of peppers or types of onions. That variety allows each one to perform to the best of its ability given the conditions. And some years, some varieties perform better than others. So it gives us the ability to harvest those that grow best and produce the most each year. Finally is the irrigation. For those of you guys that don't use irrigation, I would highly, highly recommend it. We've got irrigation line running to all 25 of our beds. And the fact that we can have that irrigation on a timer and every day, twice a day, those beds get watered with drip irrigation has been a big deal, especially as hot as it can get here in Central Texas during the summer. The plants need to be watered on a regular basis so they don't end up getting fried in the sun. So anyway, it's been a great year. Had an absolute blast, especially having some help this year, at least to get things going. And as always, just love harvesting our own fruit and vegetables for much of our summer diet. And of course, filling our freezers with the things that we can freeze so that we can eat off of the garden all year round.
Thank you for listening to the Sowing Seed Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review in iTunes or your podcast player of choice. So until next time, go plant the seed you need to succeed.